So I've started my recording. Again, today's demonstration and lesson, we start lesson 12. And lesson 12 covers camera raw. For those of you who have a digital camera that saves in raw file format or JPEG, this can be extremely helpful ancillary component to Photoshop, okay? Camera raw is fundamentally your digital negative. For those of you who have ever taken a traditional photography class where you have to have a roll of film and you process it and you go into the dark room and work with it. In the digital mode, you don't have the physical aspects of it, but instead you do have a digital negative. And that's what camera raw is. And especially if you have a raw file format, there is a lot of metadata built into that file that I think is pretty extraordinary. More than you would ever probably want to know in some instances. And there's a lot of way that you can add additional metadata too to help help you at a later date, such as naming it. If you have a camera also that has, well, like your smartphone, especially if you use an iPhone, when you take a photograph, it records the location of where you've taken that photograph. And if you've taken it in a plane, it will also note the altitude as well as your longitude and latitude, which is pretty incredible. And that is embedded in the metadata of that image. So that's what I want to show you next. We're going to go ahead and we're going to share the screen. And I'm going to go to here. Actually, oh shoot. Hold on, let's go ahead and I'm going to select this one. So this has, I want to share more than just this. This is not camera raw. It in fact is the bridge. That's where I'm looking for my images. So I'm going to do a separate share to make sure that you can see the background image as well. So I'm going to do a new share. And I want to share all of this. There we go, everything. Hold on one second here. Okay, so I hope everybody can see. Let me close. So what I have in the foreground here is the bridge. So everybody knows, I hope, that when you're in Photoshop, this is my Photoshop file. And if I go to edit, I go to file and I say browse and bridge, that's what pops up. Bridge is another ancillary program that enables you to view files, to rename them, to categorize them in any way, shape, or form you choose. Now, one of the things that I'd like to show you before we move on to camera raw, is that right now I'm viewing this in Filmstrip mode. And so if we look at the top here, I have this clicked. If you click Essentials, it looks like so. No, let's see, Essentials. There we go, that's how it looks. And there is some metadata to the right, and there's some filters to the left, and we have our images here. But when I click on the images, notice that it gets a little bit bigger in the right-hand corner. But if I move the cursor over to the right and I stretch it over, it still doesn't get any bigger, but then if I move this down a little bit, it gets bigger. I don't like viewing it that way. If I view it in Filmstrip, it places the files at the bottom. And now I have a nice, large, clean image to view. Okay, so there are a few parts to this lesson, and we're going to do today, we're going to work on the mission project. And then next Tuesday, we're going to work on refining this portrait of this woman. This is the before, and this is the after. Here is the before, here is the after here. And then inside this folder, there are 3 additional files that we're going to work on today. And I'll show you how that works in Camera Raw. Okay. But before we even work in Camera Raw, if I, again, if we're in Bridge, and if I switch to metadata, and we look at any one of these images, or if I switch back to lesson 12 inside there, and I select, let's select the woman here. I'm going to select the NEF file, which is Nikon's extension for a RAW file format. If we look at the others, if we look at the mission files, you'll see that their extension ends in a CRW, which is Canon RAW file format. So every manufacturer generally has an extension that they use for RAW file format. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but also that you can, from the Bridge, you can open JPEGs in Camera Raw. So to do that, let me go back to Filmstrip mode for a minute. I want to click on this fruit photograph, a nice, beautiful still life of a fruit. And if you right or control click on it, notice that you can open in Camera Raw. You can do that with JPEGs. You cannot do that with Photoshop files. You can't do that with TIFF files, only with RAW file formats, which are the original digital negatives, or JPEGs. And with some cameras, JPEGs are the digital negatives. But what I wanted to point out is that, let's go back to metadata, and let me select her again, right here. So here's our NEF file. And if I switch to metadata here, and you look over to the left, we can see a lot of information about this particular image. You can look at file properties, you can see the file name, and you can see the document type, Camera Raw image, you can see the version, you can see the date it was created and the date it was edited. You can also see the file size and that it is an RGB file. If I close this information right here and I look at the IPTC core, that would be if we decided ourselves to add who is the creator of this, what was the job title, what is the creator's address, if you want to add a city, a state, a province, postal code, any additional information you want, you can do that. So those are up to you. You can add to that core RAW file format or that digital negative. What I wanted to point out though, which I find pretty amazing that you may not be aware of, is that if you look here under the camera data, under the EXIF extension or file or data, that you can see here that the exposure mode was set to auto. The focal length was a 62 millimeter. The focal length in 35 millimeter was 62 millimeter. You can see that the lens was actually as a zoom lens, it was 24 to 70 millimeters. You can see that the aperture was f2.8. And if we scroll down here a bit more, you can see that this was taken with a Nikon camera. And it gives you that it was a one-chip sensor. It tells you the body serial number. It tells you the lens specifications, and on and on and on. If I were to select one of the others, let's select, for example, the Camera Raw from one of the missions, you can see down at the bottom here that this was taken with a camera, a Canon EOS digital camera. Again, this was now taken with a focal length of 37 millimeters, and the lens itself was, again, a zoom lens. It was a wide angle, 18 to 55 millimeters. The f-stop, 4.5. You can see that the flash, you know, if that was used or not, a lot of important information. You can see down here, I was talking about GPS. Well, for these cameras, there is no GPS. However, if I go back to, let's go back to, I'm going to go back to the desktop for a minute. Let me go back to Photoshop. Wait, there are a couple people are chatting here. Oh, you can't see my screen? Can you see it now or not? Let me know. Can you see this screen or not? We can only see me? No, okay then. Yeah, thank you for letting me know. Then I need to share a different, I'm sorry. Let's go back and let me hide this and let's go back and try again. So I'm going to bring this forward and let's see again. So I'm going to share a different, oh shoot, I probably moved something around that I shouldn't have. Okay, let me, my mistake. Let me go back here and share the screen again. So what I want to share is this one. This is the Photoshop one, but I want to share a bit more than that. I'm presuming everybody can see the Photoshop. I wanted to select this image here, and I don't want to open it in Photoshop. Damn, hold on here. Another one here. Let's look at the chat. Is it still, you can still only see me? We can see, now you can see, now we can see it? Okay. Thank you. Let me leave this up and let me know just in case. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and I'm going to go back again and I need to move some stuff around here on my screen so we can see this. Let's bring this back up. And I'm going to share again. So let's go back over. I'm going to share the screen again. Let's see the Q&A. Jump in here and jump in there. Okay. So the screen sharing isn't working at the moment. Okay, well, it was. I've stopped sharing for the moment. So I'm going to go back. And I want to share this screen here, but I also am going to do a different share. I'm going to go ahead and not want to do a new share. And I want to make sure that everything, this one is being shared, the entire screen. So everybody can see okay? Yes? Okay. So let me go back. Okay, good deal. So let me go back to a couple of steps here. I'm not going to show you the photograph of my family. That I took with my iPhone. But the point I wanted to make is that with the iPhone, you could see the location, the GPS. That was recorded in there, which is really kind of nice. Anyway, what we're going to do today is we're going to work on the, let's look at this in Filmstrip. We're going to work on the missions today. So this is the final one, and this is the start file. So when you have a raw file format, and when you're in, it doesn't matter where you are when you open it. If I double click to open it, it automatically loads in camera raw. So I got to ask everybody, since that wasn't visible before, do you see it now? Do you see the camera raw window? Anybody, you see it? You see the big image of the, Okay, so now you see, okay, so now we see the image of, I have so many windows on my tiny little screen, I can't tell. So here is camera raw, and it's the picture of the mission. If we look to the bottom, you can see that the percentage, we can zoom in or zoom out. If there are multiple images, which there are not at the moment, you can slide between them. Over to the right, this is the important part along with the top. These are all of your tools that allow you to edit the image. But when I say edit, it is never a permanent change. If you go back and you save these changes as a camera raw file format, that it will remain a part of the digital negative that you can change at any time. So what I want to do here is let's start with this image. You can see that it was taken on a cloudy day. It's a little overcast. The whole image is a little bit dark. So what I want to do is we can leave this as shot, or I can come over here and I can switch to cloudy day. And notice already that, sorry about that. That brightens it up just a little bit. So what we can do is we can change the exposure of this a little bit, and we can change the tint. I'm going to go ahead and reduce this a little bit to brighten this up a little bit. We can also go up here to the top, and I can select white balance, and I can check from here. Notice that that brightens it up even more. So there are all of these settings. We can change the exposure. I can darken it. I can lighten it from here. Okay. I can change the contrast from here. So right now, there are specific settings that the book wants us to use. However, when you're doing this yourself, it is at your discretion. You know, it's not chiseled in stone. You can change these settings to your liking. We can change texture. We can increase the saturation a little bit, make our pinks a little bit brighter. We can increase the vibrance a little bit to change the whole appearance of this. And then when we're done with this, you have a choice of how you want to open this. You can open the image, and when you select open, it will open it in Photoshop. What we can also do is we can, in the lower left-hand corner here, we can save the image, and there's different ways that we can save it. If I save the image now, it will, I can save it in the same location, or I can save it in a new location. So I'm going to save it right now in the same one. Then we have a file naming system. Right now, if we save it as a DNG file, that is Photoshop's digital negative. And right now, it's just going to save it with the name, the current name is a DNG file. But if I also want to add additional information, if I want to go ahead and add a 2 or 3 digit serial number, I can do that. If I also want to include the date, the month, day, and year, I can do that. And for the numbering, since I'm using a digital negative, it starts with 001, and then it adds the file extension .dng. Okay, so there's all these things that you can do to save multiple versions of this as a digital negative, as before you even edit it at all in Photoshop. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that. So that's that part of the lesson here. If I look in here, let's see. Let's look at, I'm looking at my textbook because I want to see if there's any more settings. Yeah, they changed the tint. They changed some exposure. Oh, so let me go in here. So we changed the exposure settings. They brightened it up a bit to a plus 20.20 rather, just to show you the difference. They added some contrast to it. So the lights and the darks are a little bit greater, plus 18. Now, obviously, when you're adjusting your own images, you're not going to have a textbook to refer to. They've boosted the highlights a little bit to +8. Shadows, they really boosted that to 64 or 63. Really crank that up. Actually, what they're doing is they're pumping light in the shadows. Notice is that I increase that in the darker areas, especially if we look in the bushes here or in the trees. You can see that you can see much more detail than we could before. We're going to boost the whites a little bit, +12, 13, that's fine. Blacks, we're going to knock those down a little bit, -14. Clarity, +3, so it's a little bit sharper. That's all that does. Vibrance, which pertains to the color, we can go ahead and we can boost that up. I boosted it to 7. I only use 3, 4. And then the saturation, just 1. Again, it's really up to you what you want to do. But if we compare the before and the after, it's considerably different. Okay. So those are all the changes that we can make in here. Then we have at the top that I haven't even covered, or that we don't cover in this lesson, that these are our basic settings. But if we look at the curve structure, we can change that. We can change the details of our image from here. I'm clicking on all these different tabs at the top here. So here's our toning of this from reds to magenta around the color wheel. We have split toning that we can adjust. We have lens correction in here, effects that we can add, and all of these, again, are editable. They are non-destructive. We can go on and on and on about it. In fact, there are textbooks available if it interests any of you who are pursuing a degree in photography that cover just that, the digital raw, or camera raw, I should say. So right now, if I'm happy with this, I can go ahead and I can open it in Photoshop. Now it's in Photoshop and I can continue to edit if I so choose. Okay. Now, there's another nice feature to this, and that's what else is that we'll be covering in here today, is that I have 3 images of a mission that were all taken on the same day, but they all look a little bit different in their coloration. Well, what if I want to make them all uniform in color? Well, what I can do is I can hold down the Shift key to select all 3 of these, and then double click and open those in Camera Raw. And you'll notice over to the left that we can select from each of these 3. We can determine that is there one overriding image that we would prefer the others to be adjusted to. So what I can do is I can hold down the Shift key and I can select all 3. But notice that there's a little blue box surrounding the top one. So as I come back in here and I change that, and again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to, use some of the same settings that we did before for that single image, but rather than as shot, I'm going to switch to a cloudy day. That brightens up the pink qualities of that mission considerably. We can go ahead and we can increase the exposure a little bit. We can go ahead and increase the contrast a little bit. I'm not looking at the settings. I'm just, meaning the ones in the textbook. I'm just adjusting this a little bit. Shadows, we're going to really boost those up a little bit. And as I change that, notice that all of these others are changing as well. If you look to the left, that they are being adjusted to the same degree that this one is being adjusted. So again, we can go ahead and I can add a little bit to clarity. I can add a little bit to vibrance. I can add a little bit to saturation. And if I'm happy with the settings of this, now where you would want to do this is that obviously, you know, if you have multiple images that you plan on printing, or perhaps maybe you're designing a catalog or you're designing a book, and you're going to present these images and you want them to look like they were all shot on the same day at the same time, which they were, but you want them to be uniform in their presentation. This is done all the time, especially in fashion catalogs, where you'll have exterior shots that where there's less control of the environment, and you want to make sure that the models, especially the models' skin tones, are uniform from one photograph to the next. Well, this is what they would use in order to do that. Okay, really, really useful tool. So now I can open all of the images, or again, I can save all of the images just as I had done in the last portion of this lesson. And we can go ahead and I'm just going to open them right now so you can see what happens here. So here are all of the images. Notice that they've all been transformed to the same degree based on the first one. Now, if I wanted to select a different one before, I would go back here and I would select all of these again. And if I double clicked to open them, so maybe I wanted, now notice that it's going back to the settings that I just used from before. If I want to reset this, I can. We can cancel or just select done, or I can hold down the Option key. And this is true for any of these flyout or these panels that open up. If I hold down the Option key, instead of saying open image, it says I can open a copy, or I can reset. And if I reset, it just goes back to the original settings. Come on. Why aren't you resetting? Oh, because I already opened it. That's why. Okay, so I can go back and I can change these, you know, by hand. Anyway, let's see if there's any more questions from you guys. This will be relatively short today. The other option that I wanted to show you, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. And I'm going to go back to Digital Raw or Camera Raw. And I'm going to go back again to show you, for example, if we were to open the, here we have the still life of the pears. And if we wanted to enhance part of this, again, if I hold down the Control key and I click on it, I can say that I want to open this in Camera Raw. Otherwise, if you don't do that from Camera Raw or from Bridge, and you just simply double click on it when you're in Photoshop, but from the Bridge, it will open it in Photoshop. If you double click on a JPEG image and you're not in Photoshop, it will open it in, what is it? It's the default preview program in on your computer. So now if I open this in Digital Raw, notice that I have the same options available to me. So now I can come in. This is sort of the extra credit section of this that you really don't have to do, but it's kind of cool anyway. We can select some settings here. Notice that I can come in here and I can brighten up just parts of the foreground image, or maybe parts of the background a little bit, and I can add pins to it and really touch it up and enhance it considerably from the image. It was a strong image before, and now it's even stronger. And again, all of this is done from the ancillary program, Camera Raw. But again, I opened up a JPEG, I came in, and I'm starting to use some of the tools at the top here. I mean, I can crop it from here, I can straighten it from here, rotate it from here, do a whole bunch of different things. Again, that are non-destructive, that we can go back and we can remove and edit and change. And it's all this built-in metadata that we have that is part of our digital negative. So I'll just select cancel. So I'm done with that. let me go ahead and just get started with her. It's a nice photograph of this lady. So what I want to do is I'm going to switch here so we can adjust, for example, the white balance in her. So I'll go ahead and I'll double click on her to get her going inside Camera Raw. And what I want to do is I'm going to select from the top. We're going to work on this more on Monday. But I'll click here and I need to find the whitest white. And notice as soon as I clicked there, it changed the total coloration of that, of her. Okay. So that's probably where I would want to select. They chose a white area in her dress. So again, if I select from here, maybe that's a little bit better. It's not so amber in color. If I selected it from back here, not so much. If I select it from up here, so actually the white of her dress, the whitest white gives me the truest coloration of her. Okay, so that's where we're going to start with her, adjusting her. And because before, if we go back, if I hold down the Option key and I say reset, notice that there's a greenish cast to her. I don't know if you can see that on your screen here, but it's a slight greenish cast. So again, if I use the top eyedropper here, this is for white balance. And if I click in here into the whitest areas, that takes some of that greenish cast out of there and changes the white balance. So that's where we've started. The next that we probably want to do is we're going to switch to, we're going to adjust levels. So that would be, let's see, where is our levels? Toning, correction, there's level, no, that's presets. That's. Let me go back here and let's adjust the temperature a little bit. We're going to go ahead and push this up a little bit so that the exposure is 0.50. Boost that a little bit so it's a little bit brighter. And let's see, plus temperature they have, yeah, 3,500. And then clarity, we're going to go down here and we're going to add that, boost that a little bit, 2 + 8. Okay. Considerable difference from before, taking into consideration the interior light problems that we had. Before we had exterior light problems with cloud coverage, and now based on the kind of lights that are on the interior, we need to make corrections for that. Okay. So once I've made those changes, we're going to go ahead and we're going to open it in Photoshop. And then we'll save it and make some final changes. And that's what we'll do more of on Monday. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and open the image in Photoshop. And now what we're going to do in here is we're just going to use some of the basic tools that we've used before. What I would prefer to do is, rather than, as I've done before in many of our lessons, is rather than work on this background image, I'm going to go ahead and hit Command J to make a copy of it so that I'm not working on that. Even though I have considerable backup available to me. Then what I want to do for this particular lesson in the adjustments level, they're not going to use curves, they're going to use levels here. And I can go ahead and I can pull this down to bring up some of the lights in the end. Or I can, what I typically do though is I start with auto and see where that takes me. And then I can make some, fine tune some adjustments. Once I've made those changes and it affects just that layer, Then what I can do is I can come back in here and we can, actually I don't want to, let's see, we're going to change some saturation in here. I already duplicated the layer. Oh, if I were to go back, let me go back to camera raw. Let me open this again in camera raw. So let's take her. And I'm going to go back and open in camera raw. So now that I have camera raw back open, I can go back and forth if I want. What I can do is that we can edit the saturation up here. So let's go to the HSL adjustments. And for example, instead of working with all of this, I can reduce the reds a little bit to a -2, so it's not too red. I can go ahead and I can adjust the oranges a little bit, so they're a little bit less intense, -10. We can go ahead and reduce the magentas as well to -3. -3. Okay. Now we're going to go back to Photoshop. So let me go back to the Photoshop. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use the healing brush to edit some of her blemishes. How many blemishes you choose to reduce from one of yours is totally, your personal images is totally up to you. But we're going to use the spot healing brush, make sure that her image is selected. Make the brush a little bit larger, just a little bit larger than some of her freckles and things like that. And we'll remove a handful of them. Okay. Just a few, not too many. If you remove them all, it really looks terribly unnatural. And so this for a portrait, for an interior shot, are some of the things that we would change and some of the changes that we'd make, starting with camera raw. Okay. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover today. There's a little bit more that we need to do with her, aside from removing some of the blemishes. Well, they also wanted us to remove the little nose thingy that she has here. Oh, boom, that's gone. But that's pretty much all that I had for you today. I need to know from you. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn sharing off for a minute. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause the recording.